So welcome to the class, and we are, I guess I want to start out by just talking a little bit about why I'm even here, I guess. Why I do thermal cooking. About 10 years ago, I started teaching preparedness classes, and I really enjoyed teaching them. They started with grains, and then I moved on, and eventually it was a lot of preparedness ones. About 3 years ago, I was introduced to a thermal cooker, and it was really sort of obnoxious because my background is in catering. My mom and I ran a wedding business for 25 years. So when I heard about thermal cooking, I really was sort of like, are you kidding me? I didn't even know what that was. I mean, how do you not know what thermal cooking is? But it's been around forever. What happened was my mom told me, she says, Cindy, I have this thing, I really would like your opinion on it. I'd really like to buy one. I think it's really a good thing to have in our preparedness. I'm like, okay, Mom, that's great. I'll go ahead and do that. That sounds good. She goes, go online and look it up. I said, okay. And like 3 months later, she says, Cindy, I just bought that thing I told you to look at and you never did. I'm like, okay, I'll do better. I'll come over and I'll look at it. I'd love to see it. And a couple months later, time passes. A couple months later, I'm at her house and she says, Cindy, stay right there. And she set it in front of me. And it was a Shuttle Chef. And it's a vacuum sealed version of a thermal cooker. And the one she has is a 6 liter. I think it's a 6 liter, and it has one pot on the inside. And it's really efficient. And it was fun. And I picked that thing up and I looked at it and I went, are you kidding me? This is great. I'm like, I love this. And the next day I had a class scheduled at my house, and it ended up being pretty much a thermal cooking class that next day. In the morning I researched all night, and the next morning I called Saratoga Jack, or I emailed them, and within 10 minutes Amy was on the phone, and she was, come on down and come and see what we can send up and help you with your class, and do group orders or whatever you want to do, we'll help you. So from then on, it was really simple to see. Really quickly I learned that we need a cookbook. People wanted me to have that book done in the first year, didn't they? It's like, get this book done, get this book done. And guess what happened? There are things in the book now that would never have been there without waiting this amount of time. There was a reason why. When we got to this, there was a time I lost almost a month's worth of work. I'd worked for a month and ignored my family, and guess what? It disappeared into the abyss of the cloud. I don't know, I had a corrupted file and lost 3 weeks worth of work. So every time I was doing work on those pages after that, it was just sort of surreal. It's like, seriously? It seems like I've already done this. And I had. So I was really careful about paying attention to my family after that. At least I tried to be. After that, I only lost a couple hours worth of work. I didn't ever lose a whole days and days worth again. So I tried to pay attention to my family. And then when December came along, it was just time. It was time to finish, because I had been working on it all along, but it was just time to finish those final touches and get it all put together. And so in the end of December, I just got busy, and now we have a book. Isn't that the best part? Look, does that look like a book? Anyway, and there's pages, and most of them are signed, because I signed a whole bunch so far. So I don't know why you want my signature, but you get it, right? Okay, so the basic concept of thermal cooking, it's retained heat cooking, okay? It's been around forever. The history is clear back who knows how long. You have, let's say, a pig, right? You're going to dig a hole, build a fire, put some rocks in it, put a pig in it, and cover it up. The earth is retaining the heat that you've got inside of there. So what we've got here is we have a thermal cooking unit that retains the heat inside that we have generated. We have to have a fuel source to generate the heat. So this isn't going to do it without a fuel source. So fuel source is very important. So why don't we talk a little bit about fuel sources while we're talking about that. This is a butane stove. I stole your butane stove from over there. Okay. Why do I like butane, especially for preparedness? Any ideas? You can cook it inside. Exactly. It's portable. Exactly. So here's the canisters. When I teach my indoor-outdoor cooking methods, at least when I was planning that talk, I thought through, okay, if I was in an emergency, what source of fuel would I use first? And it would depend on the emergency. If I could go outside, I would always go outside first. Why? Even though this is extremely convenient and I want to use my butane, what would happen if I was quarantined after I used up all my butane, right? And how many sources of fuel are there outside that you could use to heat and cook? A ton. We have briquettes or charcoal, right? We have propane, a fire. There's a lot of different kinds. So think about that when you get your butane, and think through how you would do your fuel sources in emergency. Because no matter how many cookers you have, or if you have a cooker and you have food, if you don't have a way to heat them up, you got a little bit of a problem. So think through that when it comes to your preparedness. So actually before the 1900s, I read some articles about the men that would go off to war, right? They would have these wagons, and in the wagons the cooks would boil up their big pots of whatever they were going to eat later in the day. They'd put them on these wagons and insulate them around, right? Probably where the straw box or hay box started, and insulate as best they could with whatever they had, and then the men would walk and the wagons would be pulled, and then when they stopped for the day, they had the food for the soldiers to eat. So it's been around even in that way for a long time. In the early 1900s, we have what's called a hay box or a straw box that were really popular. And they were just basic boxes insulated with hay or straw or some sort of insulation down inside where the pot goes in the middle. I remember seeing one online that had spaces for 3 pots. And it looked like about the size of a piano bench with a top that came up, and it even had a back on it, so it was actually a bench you could sit on. And when you lifted that up, there were places for 3 pots inside. One thing about those straw boxes or hay boxes was that they used a soapstone, because I don't think the hay and the straw, although their insulators aren't great insulators, so what they would do is they would have a piece of soapstone that they would put on a flame, and that would heat up nice and hot, and they'd put it down underneath the heated pot that they would put in there. Later on, in the stoves, you can find stoves that have thermal cooking parts in them, the old time stoves, right? But what happened about the 40s or 50s, what started happening in our society that made it so that now we really don't use thermal cookers? Yes, Kathy. Crock pots, slow cookers. In fact, crock pots were right about that time when they were developed, for sure. Even a microwave, electricity, right? Right, so we sort of got spoiled. Did you know thermal cookers are really popular in the Orient and in Australia? Because they're, have to be a little bit more careful with fuel. Is one butane stove gonna do me? I don't know, I might need at least 2. Because when we think of thermal cookers, and if you have a Saratoga Jack thermal cooker, we have 2 pots that need to be heated up at the same time, right? So the basic concept, let me finish with history. In the 1970s, a Wonder Box came out. We started making Wonder Boxes. We could see them around. And we started getting out more into the world and being aware of people that were poverty stricken and trying to help. And I remember finding some pictures of some ladies in Africa that had thermal cookers. And what the article talked about was they love their sun ovens, right? They're nice, but they have to baby them. They have to stay there, they have to rotate them, they have to make sure nobody steals them. That type of a thing. And then also their fires have to be maintained during the day, but a thermal cooker has freed them up to be able to go work or go do whatever they have to do, because they'll put the food in their thermal cooker, and they're made out of baskets, just beautiful colors in their baskets that they've made these thermal cookers out of. And then they slide them under their bed. Nobody knows they're there. They don't have a problem with anybody stealing their food, and they just come back later in the day and they can feed their family, and it's freed them up for the day. So I think that was a really nice, there's reasons for a thermal cooker in it just opened my eyes to ways that we can utilize the thermal cooker. In 1996 was when the first stainless steel thermal cookers came out, and they came out of Japan. And so that's this type of a unit. There are 2 types of insulation basically in the stainless steel type of thermal cookers. First is vacuum sealed, like the Shuttle Chef. I love the vacuum sealed ones. I think they're very efficient, especially for small things. Say you want to cook just enough cereal in the morning for you and your husband, right? Or you and your wife, right? Okay, we have a man here, I have to go both directions, right? So, and we just want a small amount. I'm not gonna use a foam insulated unit for that, because it will never retain the heat. I need to have a vacuum sealed, and they're very efficient that way. They're a little more, they're easier to break. I did see one at a trade show, and I want one, except for they only have a small top on it, right? It's more for drinking a drink thing, and I would like it. I think they need to make them different so we could utilize them. But they could run over them with a car and it wouldn't break them. Because that's the weakness in a vacuum sealed unit, is if they break, they're totally inefficient. Okay, if you crack that seal, the insulator's gone. They're also they're a bit more pricey than the foam units. So what do you look for when you look for a foam unit? A couple things to look for. Because a foam unit's going to be less expensive, but I have seen foam units that aren't as efficient. So when you look at them, I saw one year as Christmas was coming up, and I saw an ad in the paper for a big box store, and it said thermal cookers were $60. I'm like, seriously? How did you do that for $60? How do you sell a thermal cooker for $60? I don't know. So when I read through it, it says, well, keep your food warm for 3 to 4 hours. That was the answer. It wasn't well insulated. You need to have it insulate your food at least 8 hours. That's how you tell if it's going to hold the heat for 8 hours. That's a pretty good unit. Okay, don't get one for 3 to 4 hours, because there's so much you can do between 4 and 8 hours. That's a huge amount of time, and so many things you could do. Beans, meats, several other things, plus just convenience, right? If you know and you're going to be busy all day and can put something in the morning and come back later, what a great way to utilize that time instead of knowing you have to be back in 3 hours. How many times do I open up in 3 hours? A lot. 4 hours, a lot. This I put on at 2, probably 1:30 or 2, the food I made you today. So it'll be between 3 and 4 hours that we open it up. But still, I still could have it in there till 8 and I'd still be fine. Or 8 hours, so it's just great. I love that concept of being able to have it last. As far as these thermal cookers, there's a couple things. If these type crack inside of here, it will render them inefficient. I don't know how you can do that. Let me know if you ever figure out how to crack the inside, because I drop mine all the time, and the outside doesn't seem to matter. The inside will be a problem. If the top lid falls off, then that's probably a problem. This one has a little bit of problem with the latch, but it will still close. I'd almost put something over that so it doesn't pop open. Because the thing about thermal cookers, you want to make sure that you don't open this after it's closed and the food's been it's cooking in there. Because what's going to happen if you open it? All your heat's going to go. Okay, so you want to keep it closed. So if I drop this and it drops down and I go like this, and then your kids come by and pop that, you're going to pop this handle right off. And we tried to get some handles, and they said, well, we can't send them to you because you can't put them in. It's part of the process, and there's just a press that puts that in there, so we can't replace the handles, and you'll just have one without handles. And I have a couple without handles, because now I go like this and I set it down like this. I try and remember to do that every time I use it, because that's really the only thing I've seen with my particular units.